أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما ومن تاب وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله متابا والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما والذين إذا ذكروا بآيات ربهم لم يخروا عليها صما وعميانا والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما خالدين فيها حسنت مستقرا ومقاما قل ما يعبأ بكم ربي لولا دعاؤكم فقد كذبتم فسوف يكون لزاما صدق الله العظيم.
Brother Rostam, you're muted.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Can you hear me?
Alhamdulillah, we can hear you.
Okay, mashallah. So thank you so much. We've been meaning to host an event like this at MCGP for quite some time in person. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we're having to do this via virtually. But inshallah, hopefully in future years, we can host everybody in person. There is a lot of demand from the parents, from many stakeholders, from the youth as well. There used to be a teen dean that Imam Mendez was hosting. So we do know that there is demand for having the youth, their questions answered, the parents' questions answered. So this is our humble initiative to try to initiate this. But inshallah, we will try as much as possible to allow time for Q&A as well. So without further ado, we will start with Sister Patty Anton. She is the chaplain at University of Pennsylvania. I've heard Sister Patty talk in numerous occasions, been very impressed with her insights. She's very active, obviously, in the campus at Penn, which has a pretty buoyant Muslim Student Association and Muslim life as well. We hope to have Sister Patty, who used to come to the campus pre-COVID regularly for programs, but we hope to have to feature her, in person in the future. So without further ado, Sister Patty, please enlighten us on the topic, inshallah, how to support and help our youth, inshallah. So we will kick off with about 15 minutes plus of prepared remarks from each of the four presenters. After Sister Patty would be Brother Yaseen, Ahmed, and then after that would be Sister Suzy, Ismail, and then after that would be Imam Kamal, Cecunjanin, and then we will take Q&A at the end, inshallah. So Sister Patty, please go ahead. Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to see all your faces and to be here with the MCGP community. As you mentioned, I always would come up and visit for the wonderful programs that you have. In fact, I spent Ramadan with you, and hearing Sheikh reciting Quran so beautifully is just such a comfort to my heart, and it makes me want to just listen to him for the whole hour and not have to say anything else myself, to be honest with you. But thank you for that. That was a healing for my heart today. So as you mentioned, what I'll try to do is just kind of give a few remarks to introduce the topic and get us thinking about it, and then toss the ball over to my co-panelists. And I do hope that we have time for question and answer, because I do think it is so important, and there's so many issues and so many concerns that are there, that it will take more than the time that we have tonight, and it'll take many conversations, but I hope that what I offer will be benefit in getting the conversation started tonight. So one of the things that I wanted to just kind of name, as I started this off, is that in the Muslim community, we operate with kind of two different definitions of what is Islam and what is Muslim, right? And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, right? So we have this kind of original concept that we find in the Quran that really, Islam is acceptance of the reality of God as the only deity, the only real power, the only orientation for our devotions. And then acceptance, right, of the regulations of our interactions with creation that God has sent to us, through the Quran and through our beloved messenger, peace and blessings be upon him. But the other definition, which sometimes increasingly is being promoted in our time, right, is one of identity, right? It's something that identifies us as a group of people in opposition to other people's, right? And when we're in a university and when we're in a secular environment, oftentimes this is the definition they want to deal with, right? And when we're going from this makes us no different than any other groups of people, right? So other groups of people, they also want to protect their youth, right? They also want to preserve their way of life, and they also want to avoid some other influences in society, right? And sometimes this can be the area of ethnocentrism. It can be the Arabic term asabiya, right? We talk about tribalism, kind of my people versus other people. And when we operate from this perspective, we can potentially, claim to strive in the name of Islam as a thing, as a name, as an identity, but at the same time be neglecting it as a reality and neglecting it as a guidance. Right? And when we do it this way, our youth might carry their identity as a burden, right? Something that makes them different from others, something that's heavy, something that's difficult. But I think the more that we can return to this like original understanding that we find that reminds us that, Islam itself, it comes from this root word salama, right? With all these notions that are there to be well, right? We say assalamu alaikum, right? It's the greeting that's obligatory, that we are praying for this wellness of one another. Right? So, there's a lot of talk on campus, right, about wellness, and there's a lot of concern. And we have to make sure that we understand our orientation of that Islam wants wellness for us, right? To be whole, to be without harm, right? These meanings of completion, right? And the tranquility that comes from the remembrance of Allah. And so the more that we can attach to this original like understanding, the more that we know that Islam is not about East and West. It's not about group identity, but it's about being human, right? And the guidance we need to navigate reality, right? That which is seen and that which is unseen, right? And so when we're talking about protecting our youth, what is it that we're protecting? What are we talking about? And what I'm going to propose it ought to be is that we're trying to protect the fitra, right? The sound human nature, right? I know you've hosted Imam Fode Drame many times, and when he talks about education and he talks about, children, the purpose of education, is really about, maintaining that fitra, that sound, natural human nature. And for those of us that are adults, a lot of our spiritual practice, a lot of our guidance is trying to get back to that fitra, that soundness in our nature, right? When we look to the Maqasid al-Sharia, right, the purposes for all our rulings that the scholars have outlined, why do we have the rulings that we have, these purposes of Sharia and fiqh and all of these things, right? They're all about protection, right? They're all about preservation, preventing harm, right? And particularly in the areas of deen, religion, life, dignity, mental wellness, and the property that sustains us, right? So we have to think about these rulings that come to us in Islam from these perspectives, right? God is not in need of anything from us. God has given us guidance for our own protection, for our own wellness, so that we can be sound in our hearts. So the guidance is a gift of love. So our youth are intelligent, and they have an incredible capacity for learning at this stage in their lives, right? So what they are lacking, right, is the knowledge of how things are interconnected, right? And so when we are teaching, when we are mentoring, when we're nurturing our youth, that's what we're doing. We're sharing our knowledge and our experience of how things are interconnected, right? How are these things, the meanings, the templates, these patterns that we are passing on, right or wrong, right? That's what we're doing. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about like teenagers and we're talking about early 20s, right? And this is an age where, sometimes they can be very reckless, right? Because it's a developmental stage, but they can also be reasoned with, right? So they're no longer children, and they cannot be controlled, right? So this is the age where parents are told by the Prophet ﷺ that you need to learn to be friends with your children, right? And that means giving them the space to make their own choices. And one book I would recommend for parents and just sort of understanding it as a developmental stage is, it's called The Teenage Brain, right? I think it's very valuable to understand, like, developmentally where these ages, right? Teenagers from puberty to like 25, like what it is that they're going through and what's natural for them. What is their future in this stage of life? You know, and so when we talk about this, we also, like, as Muslims, we know that we have respect, we have deference for parents, right? But you know, there's also the other side of that, right? Is that the parents, you know, have a duty of being supportive. They have a duty of being nurturing. They have a duty of being not overbearing, right? That we remember that our gifts are both, that our children are both gifts from God, and they're also tests, right? Everything in our life, you know, even our blessings, they are tests as well, right? And that our youth, they are God's servants, right? They're not ours. And we have to ultimately entrust them back to God for their protection, right? And so I want us to just kind of think about, like, okay, well, what are we protecting them from? And you know, ultimately, we want to protect them from the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And you know, why we talk about the idea of reducing harm in any way we can, and we know that we mentioned that Maqasid al-Sharia is for that purpose, or the law and the rulings are for the purpose of protection. We know that from the time of Adam and Eve set foot into this earth, right, that no human being has worked on this earth without experiencing something of struggle, without experiencing hardship, without experiencing pain. Every single one of us has been hurt. And who among us has not experienced something of disappointment, you know, heartbreak, grief? And if we think that, you know, we can protect our youth fully in this life or protect ourselves, you know, we are deluded and we're going to find ourselves disappointed. And if we are setting up this expectation that life is going to be really good, then there's also going to be this disappointment, right? And we haven't understood the stories and the messages that are coming to us in the Quran, right? That we are in this life, we are going to be tested and we are going to be tried. So we know that right now we all wear masks and we all social distance when we get on Zoom, right? Instead of being in person, right? And this is because it's a protection for us, right? But we can't be in bubbles forever, right? And we all know this, right? And so we also have to build our immunity. And so part of our building our immunity with the youth is to understand the threats that we face and how they impact us. And so Surah Hud tells us that the stories that are related to us in the Quran are related in order to fortify our hearts, right? We're told about all the difficulties that the prophets went through. And the prophet is told this, right? So that his difficulty that was in the seerah is made easier. Right? And then we have the stories in the seerah, and we have stories throughout history and of all the righteous, right? That we can get a picture that this, you know, someone went through these difficulties, but God had a plan, right? And there's a larger story that is beyond our immediate vision, right? And so with this, you know, we don't succumb to the pain or the difficulties of our moment, right? That we, you know, fortify ourselves with these narratives, that they give us, you know, frameworks to explain the nature of life and our struggles and to explain to us our own stories, right? You know, our first protection really is to have husn dhan billah, right? This idea of having a good opinion of God, right? God isn't out to get us, right? So, you know, it's accept that God not only has our back, but God is literally holding us up in our entirety in every moment, right? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no strength, there's no power except God, right? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel, right? God is enough for us. God is the best of protectors. You know, the greatest fitna is to lose this, right? God has obligated us to do, you know, to do things that will help us to be hopeful and optimistic, right? The salam alaikum, right? Making it obligatory for us to repeat, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim in every rak'ah of our prayer, right? If we take this to heart, we're never going to lose hope, right? And so, when we understand the teachings of our deen, this gives us tools that can help us meet our challenges. And if we are dealing with Islam as identity, we're going to run into incompatibilities, right? When we have all our education and our programming, on secular software, while maintaining an exterior of Islam in some way, we're risking a system crash, right? And, our youth are going to recognize our inconsistencies, right? And so I want to just, I don't actually know how long I've been talking, but I wanted to just kind of talk about like, what are these, a reminder about the obstacles along our path. Like what is it that we need to protect it against, right? When we say, A'udhu billah, what do we say? A'udhu billah min shaitan rajim, seek refuge from Satan. A'udhu billah min nafsi, right? So Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, the great West African sheikh, he created a mnemonic device to help people remember the obstacles along the spiritual path, right? And the mnemonic device that he used was nashadu. It's in Arabic, right? And the noon is for nafs, right? So that our nafs that we have to be aware of, right? So this is the part of us that's seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, right? This is that I want, right? This is a part that we have to, discipline, right? And so this comes into play with some of the threats that people may have that our youth may have, right? And so we need to instill this idea of willpower and self-control as part of our Islam, right? We need to own our Ramadan experience in this way, right? So sometimes people think of Ramadan like it's Eid, right? And they're eating more and they're having more sweets and they're socializing more, right? Whereas, we need to know when we're in training ground, when our nafs has been tested, right? And then we also have to give ourselves a break, right? To allow our nafs to rest, right? That that we don't burn ourselves out, right? So that we have the strength and the fortitude to resist temptations when they're there, right? One other book that I'm going to recommend is The Willpower Instinct. And this is by a psychologist. And I think it's a really helpful to understand the things that help us with willpower, right? And we need to understand also media manipulation, right? So these dopamine parts of our brain are part of it, right? So there's all these different parts of our lives, whether it's games or advertising or these algorithms on social media, they're all trying to trigger certain parts of your brain, right? That have you with this anticipating of desire, right? And so, these are the parts of us that are being manipulated. So the next part in the nashadu is the Shaitaan, right? And, I'm just going to mention these things briefly. So Shaitaan's original sin, we have to remember, is arrogance, right? And his promise to us is to make us ungrateful, right? So we should always remember and be very wary of these things, that we are not in our community taking on the voice of Shaitaan, right? That tells people that they're not good enough, or that tells them that they're better than other people, right? We have to be wary about pride. We have to worry about envy. We have to worry about, this seeking prestige and things. Now the next one is in the nashadu is the hawa, right? These emotions, right? We need to be able to control our speech, right? We have to be very wary, of our, how are we talking about people? Avoiding backbiting, avoiding gossiping, right? We need to push back against our culture, right? Both the mainstream culture that likes to mock and make fun of everybody and put everything bad out there, as well as sometimes in our own social circles, right? And I'm going to be trying quick because I know I want to hear from everybody else. And the fourth is Dunya, right? That our love of things of this world, can become attachments that eat up so much of our life, and then they never satisfy us, right? So, and it could also lead us to crossing limits, right? In Penn, they have a term they call the golden handcuffs, right? Where people actually feel like sort of trapped by this seeking prestige aspect, right? And a lot of these things, so when we're talking about people and protecting, you know, the mental well-being, protecting the heart, protecting the fitra, all of these things that are going to, you know, be so relevant for our youth today. I also want us to think about, you know, as we're trying to be protective, just this idea of empathy versus shame, right? You know, shame is something that exists and has been like a technique to try and dissuade people from certain behaviors. Unfortunately, it has a tendency to weaken people's willpower, right? And it doesn't necessarily, you know, strengthen them. Fear is something that weakens people's willpower. Whereas empathy, right? You know, it allows us to recognize the humanity of people, right? To say, you know, yes, we know things are hard. It's okay that things are hard. We were not created as angels. We were, you know, this life is not always easy, right? It's okay if you're not perfect. You weren't created to be perfect. You know, you were created to do your best. You were created to strive, right? And, you know, I mentioned like the worst fitna that we could have is the fitna in the deen, right? And this can happen, you know, when we try to use too much fear to control people, right? So this can cause people to have despair, and it can cause them to lose their good opinion of God, right? And those, you know, like some of the things that I hear that are challenging for people is when those people who are claiming Islam, you know, are acting arrogantly, right? And are judgmental, and they don't have compassion, and they don't have empathy. You know, the natural result, right? People are just like, tough, this is Islam, you have to do it, right? And you don't listen to them and understand what is their struggle. People just end up feeling like, I don't want to be like this person, or I don't want to let me like these people, right? And then they might feel like other people are safer to interact with, right? And are more trustworthy. If this happens, then we failed as a community, as families, right? You know, the Prophet, you know, Allah tells the Prophet in the Quran that if you were hard or if you were harsh-hearted, people would turn away from you, right? So pass over their faults and consult them, right? And this is after the Battle of Uhud, and I'm not going to spend too much time, you know, on that. You know, if people have questions about it, we can discuss it at another time. But our youth are the same, right? And our adults too, right? If we're hard with people, they're going to turn away. I wanted to just end by sharing, because we're talking about this idea of protection. There is another saying by Sheikh Ahmed, right? Is people, you know, look for ways of protection. And we know that the Quran is something, the recitation of the Quran is something that's a protection, right? And, you know, Sheikh Ahmed said the best protection, right? The best, you know, talisman or thing that you can have to protect is to seek to harm no one, not in our hearts, not in our words, and not in our deeds. All right, forgive me if I've spoken too long. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone else.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Patty. Very insightful. Took notes of the books and beautiful insights, mashallah. So we will now move to Brother Yaseen Ahmed. He's very local to us, from the Lawrenceville community. Actually, he's prayed at our previous mosque, IAS, as well as MCGP. Alhamdulillah. Brother Yaseen now is a chaplain at Cornell University in Ithaca, and we are very grateful that he's given us some time prior to going to Cornell. He's taught Islamic studies at Medina Academy in Connecticut, and he's also served as chaplain at Trinity College and Choate Rosemary Hall. So Brother Yaseen has been around, mashallah, for quite a while, and we used to use him as a resource for the youth at IAS. People locally here like him a lot. So we're very grateful that he's given us some time as well. Jazakallah khair, Yaseen bhai. It's been so long, we've been trying to make this happen, mashallah.
Can I have a screen share, if you don't mind?
Sure, we'll enable that.
But I also like the people in the community very much. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's good to see you. I miss everyone. Inshallah, hope to gather and be more of service to you all soon. So today's presentation, inshallah, let me see if I can. So I want to talk about Muslim youth wellness. And I just first, give me 1 second while I fix one thing up. Make sure that I show it properly. I think it's really, really important just to acknowledge how difficult it is to be a parent in America. Specifically, there's so many other things that we're trying to deal with. And one of the things that parents often remark is that I don't even recognize my own children anymore. I've lost what I thought that I was passing down in them. And so we began with a sincere prayer for all of our parents. Rabbi arhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on our parents for fighting the good fight despite Amen. The challenges that we face. I don't think us as the younger generation understand how much you sacrificed to give us a life that's comfortable and to pass down this deen. May Allah reward you in both worlds. This presentation, and I suggest everyone signs up for this class. It's free, you can find it online. It's through the Islamic Institute of Toronto. Apparently I live pretty close to Canada at this point. Take this course on Muslim youth mental health. And that's basically where my presentation is coming from, by Dr. Farah Islam. The first thing that I want to frame this with.
Brother Yaseen, I am not sure, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure the rest of the audience can see your screen, but your screen is showing up as gray. We can't really see the information. Apologies.
Okay, let me see if I can fix that up. Give me 1 second. Thank you for letting me know.
Sure.
Exit show. Let me do this. Share screen. All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes, I think if you minimize, if you make it full screen, if you minimize the left, it will probably be more helpful. We can read more of it. Zoom.
If I can minimize the screen?
I know, like full screen. Make it full screen.
Okay.
So we see the slides.
Okay. I hope this is reasonable. If not, you can just follow along with
Inshallah.
I'm also connected to another screen we're watching at home. So
gotcha. Okay. Carry on. Jazakallah khair.
So two of the sayings of the sage Imam Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The first was 2 things which people don't recognize the value of until they lose them. And he said that they are youth and they are health. And so these are things that are incredibly valuable. And we need to make sure that we do everything to preserve that fitrah that Ustadha Patty was talking about. And the second thing that he said, Imam Ali advised us, is do not raise your children the way that you were raised, for they were born for a different time. That to just pass on the inheritance of how we were parented will not work in this society. And so we need the ability to adapt, because 50% of mental illnesses and the beginning of substance use, whether it be marijuana or alcohol or Molly or whatever else is being used, vaping and smoking and drinking, these such things, they start by the age of 14. And by 75% of these start by towards the end of college. The earlier that we address the burgeoning mental illness of our children, the more likely we are to prevent many, many, many disturbances and breakdowns in our families and our communities. And so this is an imperative and important subject for us to tackle and to get involved with early. And one of the things that we've learned from the older generation is that they didn't understand the role of mental illness and the way that it's framed in this country. They didn't have a conception of it, and it didn't allow them to help their children when their children were in need. So let's talk about specific Muslim-specific issues. There's three that come up while youth in America just generally face a plethora of issues, three that relate to our community. One is this cultural clash. And that two things that consistently come up with the young people, that they say, I have these arguments, this huge uncrossable divide between myself and my parents, is when it comes to academic expectations and when it comes to relationships, specifically with the other gender or romantic relationships. And when it comes to academics, often parents do two things which really, really disturb the mental health, the wellness of their children. That they either compare them to themselves, that I had to fight to get to this country by being the first in my country, and I had to study 35 hours a day, and I had to walk bare feet 5 miles to school. And the child here is like, can't relate to that experience, but they feel as if they're not living up to the legacy of their parents. And it breeds this feeling of inadequacy. The second comparison is to compare our children with other people's children. Why is so-and-so smarter than you? Look at the school that they got into. Why didn't you get into this school? And so we want to just be cautious about the comparisons that we have with our children, with other children, with their siblings, and with ourselves. When it comes to relationships, which is something that comes into my office very, very often as a college chaplain, but also definitely on the high school level and even on the middle school level, is that they get young love or young lust, depending on how you want to frame it. And they don't have anyone they can share this experience with or talk to about their feelings. And that by getting into these relationships that are very difficult to avoid in school, they engender this feeling of guilt. And then they don't have anyone they can talk to about it. And then later on, when inevitably these relationships break up, they go through this trauma by themselves because they weren't supposed to be in those relationships. And so they don't have an outlet to speak to about these relationships and the emotions. And they're trying to carry the weight of these emotions all by themselves at such a young age where they don't have the coping skills and the resilience to get over these type things. The second issue pertinent to our community is when there's marital issues between the parents. And one of the things I always advise to parents is don't argue in front of your kids. You will break them. You will break your children by arguing in front of them. And when parents get divorced, and this is increasingly happening both in our community and at large, that we have to be cognizant of the way in which it affects the roles within the family. And so suddenly the oldest son, who might be 10 years old during the divorce, suddenly with his single mother, he feels as if he has to be the man of the house, but he's a 10-year-old child. Now the oldest daughter feels like she has to be the mother of the other kids. Or now I want to be the rebel. And so parents, when you go through changes in your relationships, we are all connected in this family system. And so it's important to address the different needs that come up and the different changes that affect all of the members of that family. And that finally, as Muslims, alhamdulillah for COVID, I think we're finally in a new age. We're in the COVID age. But Islamophobia was certainly something that was affecting many young people, and that affects their self-esteem and confidence. So identity issues. We can talk very quickly about substance use. These are the use of drugs, of different things. And fundamentally, it comes from a pain that a person feels, that young people feel stress in their homes, but there's nowhere to get away. that I can't leave my house. So what I can do is I can sedate and numb my feelings while I'm in this house through drugs. And the key thing that is missing, which would prevent them from feeling that way, is communication. And so we want to increase the ability to communicate within our homes. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. We'll talk about solutions in a little bit after we finish talking about these issues. Barriers to getting help. Youth are searching for help online, and they feel more comfortable going online than going to someone in person. So we want to make access to people that they can feel comfortable and not judged by in person before they go online. Muslims worry about medication and individualism, and this is often the reason why Muslims and Muslim parents and even Muslim youth are hesitant to get therapy or counseling, is because we don't want to use medications, and we don't want them to input this value of individualism and put that emphasis on individualism over the well-being of the entire family. And on some level it's justified. On another level, it's something that there's different counselors that we can find who also mirror our values or understand them. And so often Muslims hesitate to seek help because they think they're going to have Western values imparted upon them, or secular values, however you want to frame it. And families don't reach out for help because we don't want people to know that we're not perfect, because they will talk about us. What will other people think? And that is breaking our communities, trying to hold up this feeling of perfection, this image of perfection, when in reality we're all human. And in all of our families, and even in the families of the prophets, there were people who were struggling very severely. And so we can't get help, because you can't get married when people know that you have depression, or you're on antidepressants, or you have anxiety issues. And so we, rather than getting the help we need to live healthy, full, whole lives, we stop each other from getting better because we want to keep up our reputation. At least this is the way youth often see this. And because we don't reach out for help when we are recovering, it is the most lonely process, because there's no one I can talk to about the issues that I deal with on a daily basis as a young person. And so we need to start having these conversations in community spaces, from the member, etc. Having groups, and we'll talk more about those solutions in a moment. But for the young people, if there's any young people on here, know that the two people who were mentioned in our tradition who contemplated the idea of suicide were the two best of creation, the best man in creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the best woman in creation, Maryam alayhi salam. So these were two people who also felt like they needed to reach out to someone. And in the case of the Prophet alayhi salam, Jibril came and consoled him, and with Maryam alayhi salam as well. So we have the stigma against mental health. Often people feel ashamed of their problem, or they're gaslighted that no, you don't have mental health, this is all in your head. Know that if you have mental health issues, that the people in Mecca, when the Prophet was delivering the message, that one of the epithets that they called him is that they called him Majnoon. They called him crazy. And so when people call you crazy as someone who is struggling because they don't understand the things that you're going through, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could see the Prophet in you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see the spiritual person, the person of worth, even if society doesn't understand you. So I want to talk a little bit about signs, symptoms, and resources, signs that we need to intervene with our children in order to save them and to protect them and to preserve them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve all of our children. Some of the key signs are that they lose interest in their passions, that they always loved soccer, suddenly they don't want to play soccer, that they change in their sleeping habits, they usually wake up, now they're spending all day in bed. Something must have changed that was a catalyst for this change in behavior. We notice a change in their energy, in their appetite, in their weight. And some of our teachers talk about change in weight depending on which direction. It could be a reflection of anxiety or of stress eating, and uncontrollable emotions. For parents, the two things that are easiest to identify are sleep changes and personality changes. That you'll notice these shifts in your children, and that's a time that we need to listen to our children. What is going on? And when they open up to us about the fact that I did start smoking, yeah, I do have a girlfriend, yeah, I do have problems, and I don't feel like I can live up to your expectations, rather than giving them advice, what they're really seeking is just a place to share what's going on inside of them. And so we need to not give advice. It's hard, but we need to not give advice. And we need to thank them for opening up to us. Thank them for sharing the struggles that they're going through. Self-harm, this is rising, especially amongst girls. One of the things that our teachers in mental health taught us is that sometimes people who cut their wrists, they'll wear hoodies, right, to long sleeves, so that you don't see the self-harm that they're doing. So this is something that a lot of young people do, and this is something completely foreign to many of the parents, that they've never experienced this, so they don't understand it. When our children are harming themselves, it is generally because of trauma or abuse that they have experienced. And so when our children start to cut themselves or burn themselves, then possibly someone has sexually abused them and they haven't told us this story, or someone has done some type of trauma to them. And so rather than getting angry at them, don't do that. We need to go to the root cause and ask them what's going on, where is this coming from? That grief, that it's a coping mechanism that I can deal with physical pain, but the pain inside of me is too much to bear. So these are practical tips here forward for parents, when to talk and grow our relationship, have honest communication with our children. The number one principle is to speak to our children when both you and your teen are comfortable. And 5 of the times where these are good to have these deep, reflective conversations are in the car. Anyone who's done youth work knows that the time when people open up is when you're just sitting in the car with them and there's nothing else. They can't get away from you then, although they can be plugged in now, but that's a great time to have conversations. Number 2 is to families that eat together, stay together, and to have fruitful conversations as we break bread. When we spend quality time together doing activities that are mutually interesting. When people are in a good mood, in business, we call this the luncheon technique, that when people are in a good mood, they're more likely to be open with us. Number 4, when we're watching a movie that is dealing with really important substantive issues, that when we're watching a movie one night in Miami, and that they're discussing the prevalence of racism in our society, that we use that opportunity to address the anti-Blackness within the Muslim community, to talk to our children. What do you think about this? Do you see this in our community, or you think that was just them in the 1960s? And number 5 is not to necessarily bring up our baggage and the things on our mind when they're busy doing something else, but to meet them at their time, when they're free and they're ready to they have the mental capacity to have a conversation, not when they're gasping for air. So we're gonna look at 3 different types of solutions. And I hope I can finish very quickly. I'll finish in the next 2 minutes, inshallah. Community solutions, to have group therapy around grief, anxiety, stress, all of these different things. Substance use groups. If you have some of these things that you're working on, you can download the Mindful Muslim app. It helps you, brings dhikr, uses spirituality to address secular issues, therapy from mosques, that we need to give them places in the mosque where they can, resources in the mosque that they can reach out to. Educational, we need to start talking about mental health in our curriculums. In our Saturday school, we want to have lessons on mental health, how Islam addresses this. We need to develop and teach our children self-care, coping skills, how to deal with failure, that we need to show them these things, teach these things, how to deal with fallouts, and then to have people who look like our children teaching them. So specifically, we need to have female representation so that our daughters feel like they can go to role models who are also female. At mosque, we want to train our imams to be more emotionally intelligent and to deal with some of these mental health issues. We as religious leaders need to take it upon ourselves to talk about these things and to spread these words on social media. And then finally, the solutions for the parents are to model seeking help. You don't have to be perfect, and you can tell your children that I'm struggling to understand you, but I love you. If you get help, we will not think less of you. It will actually develop our empathy so we don't treat you for granted, take you for granted. Stop emphasizing what others think in comparisons. The more we talk about reputation, the less respect our children have for us. This is something we've seen in the research. And then we want to foster emotional health and resilience through the Quran and the Sunnah, and encourage some of these skills together. The final thing that I want to say, and this is I used to spend time, you guys know this, I used to spend a lot of time in Trenton Masjid with Mawlana Abdul Rahman, and a lot of parents would talk about losing their children to a host of different issues. And one of the things that he said that gave me hope and gave many parents hope is that if you have a strong relationship with Allah, he's noticed that generally those children will always come back to Allah. It might take years, it might happen after you die, but if you have a relationship with Allah and you entrust your children to Allah, Allah will fulfill that trust. Insha'Allah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have a mercy on you and us. And again, it's such an honor and blessing to spend time with you. Assalamu alaikum.
MashaAllah, subhanallah. So insightful, Brother Yaseen. We really miss your insight. We had originally planned for Brother Zishan Anwar to MC this event. He had a little glitch in joining. I believe he's joined since. So Brother Zishan, would you want to take it over from here, please?
Sure. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Marhaba. Assalamu alaikum.
Hi, Ismail.
So I believe Sister Suzy, Dr. Suzy Ismail is next. If you wouldn't mind introduce her, please.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Suzy Ismail. She might not remember this, but she was actually a teacher that I had in 5th grade, somewhere around then, for about 6 months. So it's my pleasure to introduce her. Dr. Suzy Ismail is the founding director of Cornerstone, a nonprofit faith-based communication intervention organization with several locations around the world. She's also the author of many books. She specializes in educating and empowering women, youth, and vulnerable populations. It's quite an impressive and long resume, but I want to turn it over to her for her time, and inshallah we can all learn from her.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونشكره ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum. And I'm trying hard to remember you, Brother Zishan. The name definitely sounds familiar. I hope, as your teacher many, many moons ago, I hope I didn't damage your educational trajectory too much.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Right. Jazakumullah khair to the MCGP community and particularly Brother Rustam, for inviting me to speak on this topic. It's a topic that is definitely something that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. As through my work at Cornerstone, through my years of teaching and in the education sector, working with youth is something that I've gotten to see from the perspective as a parent, of my own 3 teenagers, but also from the perspective of working with parents who are struggling in, how do we raise our children in a way that is pleasing to Allah? How do we raise our children, and particularly our youth in those young adult years, in a way that gives them the foundation they need to succeed in both dunya and akhirah? And I think, one thing that I noticed on the flyer and that caught my eye is the topic of conversation tonight, how to protect and support our children. And I can't tell you how many times I have had parents who will focus so much on the protection part and not necessarily fully understand the support part. And that's why I was happy to see that this is a conversation this evening in which we are not just talking about protection, but we're also talking about support. And to kind of follow up after the beautiful presentations by Ustadha Patricia and Brother Yaseen, I really want to emphasize, how do we understand those boundaries or that process of not just protecting, but also supporting, and why it's important to do so. So I have had many parents, parents who come to our counseling centers, and actually we do have 5 Cornerstone locations in New Jersey. One of our Cornerstone centers is in Princeton Carnegie Center, which is not too far from MCGP. But we've had parents come into our centers, parents, through Skype sessions, phone sessions, so many different sessions, saying, I want to protect my child. And so in order to protect my child, I am not going to give my teen a cell phone until that teen is in college. And it doesn't matter that every other kid has a cell phone in school. It doesn't matter that, the child is 16, 17, 18. This is my rule, no cell phone, because I'm protecting them. I'm going to protect my child, and so I'm not going to allow my child to go out with friends. I'm going to protect my child, so I'm not going to let them sign up for the football team or the soccer team. And we become so focused on protection and thinking of protection as keeping our children in this bubble that we are trying to create, that we lose sight of that second part of the important phrase we're talking about tonight, which is support. So rather than defaulting immediately to, you're never going to have a cell phone, or, no, you're not allowed to watch anything on Netflix, or, absolutely not, you can't go to this event or hang out with this friend, we need to start understanding our children. Why does the child want a cell phone? What is it that they feel they would gain in having a cell phone? Why is it something that, from a critically thinking perspective, why is it something that maybe they could understand and see, what, maybe it's not something I need? Why is the child at age 11, 12, or 13 begging for a Snapchat? Why do they want an Instagram? Why are they dying to join TikTok? Now, here's the pitfall. As parents, as we put those layers of protection, when our children are young and it's a snowstorm outside, a typical Jersey winter when it's freezing, and we put layers of protection upon them. We put the jacket, we put the hat, we feel as parents like we are in control. We're able to provide this protection, and we feel that we are fulfilling our Islamic duty as parents, recognizing that these children are an amana and we're able to protect them. But as our children grow older, as they pass that first stage of tarbiyah, age 0 to 7, where the child is essentially like the master, the child has, looks to us as their form of security, looks to us as their role models. As we pass that stage and enter into the second stage, age 8 to 14, and then into the third stage, 15 to 21, we are no longer the role models for our children. Unfortunately, we want to be that again. And hopefully in that last stage of tarbiyah, we will. But there is a very critical period of time. We know it as the middle school and the early high school years, in which our children are going to look to their friends. They're going to look to Beyonce rather than to mom. They're going to look to, I don't know who's popular these days, but I don't know, Tupac or someone, and instead of their dad. And so our children are going to look elsewhere. And as they look elsewhere, they're going to have difficulty understanding those layers of protection that we keep piling on them if our response to every question is no, it's haram. Absolutely not, it's haram. We don't do that, it's haram. Rather than taking the time to truly understand, taking the time to explain, taking the time to empower our children with critical thinking aptitude and skills. From a young age, we teach our children to memorize the Quran. We focus on teaching them that, Dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs, Maghrib is 3 rak'ahs, and we do a lot of that rote memorization. When our children enter into their middle school years and high school years, they're used to at home being told, do this, don't do that, pray this way, don't pray that way, memorize this, don't talk about this, don't listen to this. And then in school, they're suddenly engaged with teachers who are asking them questions, who are saying, what do you think of this? What about this concept? Why do you think this is happening? And this is why we are losing so many of our youth to atheism, agnosticism, that freshman year philosophy class in college. How many of our young Muslim youth who are at the age of 18, 19, or 17, maybe even in their freshman year, enter into a classroom where a professor begins to question for them and say, is God omnipotent? And if God were to create a rock, could God use that rock to obliterate, and all sorts of philosophical questions. If anyone sat in a philosophy 101 class, one session, and if you're not deeply rooted in your iman, deeply rooted in your deen, deeply rooted in the ability to critically think about Islam, it can be very, very hard to respond to those situations. And so empowering our children from a young age to learn how to critically think, to understand the deen, not just to memorize it, and to provide them with support and space to listen and understand them. Those are the keys to being able to not just protect, but to also support our children. So, Ustadha Patricia had mentioned something at the end of her talk, which I thought was incredibly important, and I want to highlight it. And Brother Yaseen also had incorporated in his talk, the importance of empathy and compassion as parents. One of my favorite narrations about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a hadith from Abu Dawood that was narrated by Anas bin Malik. And Anas radiallahu anhu, we know he was someone who the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved very much. And in a previous hadith, Anas bin Malik had mentioned that he had served the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 10 years. And throughout that time, never did he hear the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam say uff to him. Never did he hear the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam blame him or say to him, why did you do this and not this? For 10 years, as a youth, he grew up in the shade of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he felt supported. Now, in the hadith that I was mentioning, Anas bin Malik spoke about his little brother, and he said that his little brother had a sparrow, a pet bird, and the bird had died, and the brother was very sad. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam took it upon himself to visit Anas bin Malik and his brother. Now the brother had a kunya, a nickname, which was Abu Umair, and the bird's name was Abu Nughayr. And so the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam went and saw the sadness on the face of this child. And he said to the child, using the kunya, using the nickname, Ya Abu Umair, ma fa'ala an-Nughayr. Right? So he made almost like a rhyme for this child to try to make him smile. Oh, Abu Umair, what happened to an-Nughayr? An-Nughayr was the name of the bird. And so this is a form of support. It wasn't a situation in which the child felt sadness and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, what do you have to be sad about? This is a creation of Allah. What comes from Allah goes back to Allah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. This is something, of course, that we want to teach our children, and in moments of sadness, we may emphasize that. But look at the beauty of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at how he supported this child in his moment of sadness with empathy, with compassion, and showed understanding and validation for the grief that the child felt. And I believe this is one of the things that we struggle with as parents, validating the emotions of our children. Because so many times, our children, even now, we're looking at the pandemic, and we're looking at so many teens and young adults and preteens who are experiencing sadness, who are experiencing depression, who are cutting, who are self-harming, who are turning to things online maybe that they shouldn't be doing. And in so many cases, we hear parents that say things like, I gave you everything. What do you have to be sad for? When I was your age, I used to clean and cook and do this and do that, and I never complained. You know? That's an invalidation of our children's emotions. That is an invalidation of what the child is feeling in that moment. You know, to go back to that concept of protection, I know, in my line of work, a lot of what I have to do, well, pre-corona, was traveling to different communities, different schools, looking at curricula, looking at the way that schools work and function. And I can't tell you how many Islamic schools will take a book, for example, like the autobiography of Malcolm X, and they'll assign it as required reading, maybe in 8th grade, maybe in 9th grade, right? The content is something they want the children to understand. And yet in that book, we'll see pages that are ripped out. We'll see pages that have, whited out words. You know, they don't want the word rape to be in that book or for the children to read it. They don't want certain violent situations to come to light. And in these same schools where the teachers and the administrators from the best of places and the best of intentions want to protect the children from being exposed to these words, in the autobiography of Malcolm X, in these same schools, we find that the 9th graders have a book, a copy of 50 Shades of Grey, and are passing it around, reading it and talking about it in the lunchroom. So when we talk about protecting our children, we really have to ensure that what we think we're protecting them from is not something they've already been exposed to and are trying so hard to understand from amongst themselves, because they know they can't talk to us about rape, because it's not a word that we've ever mentioned to them, but it's a word that they see consistently over and over again. They see it in television, they see it in music, they see it in books, and they're confused. And so who do they talk to? They turn to their friends, they turn to the internet, they turn to chat groups, they turn to Discord, they turn to Vent, they turn to these apps in which you can ask any questions and you feel like you're heard. Because when you're not supported, when you feel like you're not heard by the people that are meant to protect you, then you look for protection elsewhere. And unfortunately, the protection that they're receiving is very often completely contrary to what we want to instill in the hearts of our children, to what we want to teach our children. And so it is up to us as parents to open that dialogue, to have that communication, and to also recognize that as much as we may think we're protecting the eyes of our children by, not allowing them to read certain books, we are much better off knowing our children, finding out what they're feeling and why they're feeling it, not dismissing their emotions, validating what and understanding that it is very, very real. That for the 12-year-old who contemplates suicide because her friends posted a picture of her online and they're all talking about it and saying that she's fat and she's ugly, those emotions for her are very, very real. That feeling that she can't go on, that she can't face her friends in school another day, that she can't do anything, she can't keep going, that's a very real emotion. And for us as parents to dismiss it and say, what's the big deal? Fight back, stand up and tell them, that's not okay. Or, well, you shouldn't have been friends with them in the first place. I told you those kids were not good, right? Again, we're invalidating and we're trying so hard as parents, again, that concept of protection, but unfortunately, rather than protecting, a lot of times we're pushing them away. When Brother Yaseen was speaking, he mentioned something and, it reminded me of the importance of this verse in the Quran and why it's a verse that we need to teach our children and they need to understand it, and why we as parents need to understand the follow-up to this verse. And Brother Yaseen had mentioned how Maryam alayha salam, one of the chosen women, one of the women who is promised Jannah, a woman who grew up in the mihrab, a woman who grew up knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal was the all-powerful, that he could say, kun fayakun, be and it would be. When she is tested in one of the most difficult tests that she could have ever imagined, when she is in the throes of labor, a young woman alone, terrified of what will happen, trusting in Allah Azza wa Jal, knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal is the all merciful, knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal is the all compassionate, yet fearful, afraid. When she's in that pain of labor, she says in the Quran, we are reminded that she says, يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا. Oh, if only I had passed away before this and had been of those who were forgotten. That's a cry of pain, a cry of difficulty, a cry of not being sure that you're going to be okay and wondering what is going to happen tomorrow. And the cry of Maryam alayhi salam in that moment when she is thinking, if only I had passed away before this and had been of those forgotten. There is a beautiful response that comes to it. In the Quran, we see that the response is that there is a nadwa, a voice that calls to her min tahtiha, a voice that is very near to her that calls to her, ala tahzani, do not be sad. And she is reminded that there is a stream that runs beneath her. And in that stream, there is something that will soothe her. And so we see that the response to Maryam alayhi salam, calling out in pain, saying, you know what, I wish that I had passed before experiencing this difficulty. It's not responded to with a, that's not something you should say, or how could you, your life is an amana, you should never think about taking it. No. Ala tahzani, do not be sad. So beautiful, just as we see in the narration of Anas bin Malik, when the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Abu Umair and tried to soothe his grief. And then it continues, where Maryam alayhi salam is commanded to shake the trunk of the palm tree so that a fruit may fall. She's commanded to do something. So just like our children, when they're in the throes of sadness, when they are struggling with grief, when they are struggling because they've been home because of the pandemic, because they feel like they have no friends, because they've been bullied online, because maybe they've committed a sin, maybe they have, done something behind the parents' back and they're struggling with that now, our first response has to be one of empathy, not one of, unbridled outrage where we turn the child away or push the child away. It has to be empathy. It has to be an understanding that the grief, the fear, the sadness, the depression, the anxiety, it is real. It is real and it needs to be validated. And then in establishing that empathy, establishing that compassion, we need to understand why. We need to understand what is our child experiencing. And we may not fully understand what the pain is, but just being there. And we see that after being commanded to do something, Maryam alayhi salam is also told not to speak, to fast from speaking. So how many times when our children are crying and we're like, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's wrong, why won't you talk? How can I help you if you're not telling me? Oh, the beauty of silence, the beauty of sometimes just being near our child when they are struggling and saying, you know what? I know you're sad. I know you're hurt. I know you're going through something. And I know that you don't feel comfortable talking to me about it right now, but I'm here for you. I'm beside you. And I'm not going anywhere because I am here for you. Our children need to hear this. Our children need to know that we are there for them. And if it means sending it to them in a text message because that's their language, text them. If it means sending them an email, if it means, as Brother Yaseen was saying, talking in the car ride, if it means, going out somewhere, find the avenues, find the path, because this is your amana. These children are a trust. And we know Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us, Al-mal wal-banun zinatul hayat ad-dunya. Yes, they are an adornment, our wealth and our children, but they're also a very, very heavy trust. And when we are entrusted with something as beautiful as children, whether in the form of our own children, or the children in our community, or the children in our schools, or the children that are thousands of miles away from us, they are all entrusted to us because we are one ummah and we are one body. And so we need to feel the pain of our children. So I know I've talked for a bit of time and we want to have time for some questions and answers. But if there's anything that you take from today's program, and Sister Patricia, Brother Yaseen gave us such incredible pointers and really tangible things that we can do. But please, please, if there's anything that you take from this, just be there. Just be there for the children of our ummah. Stop rejecting them. Stop turning them away. Stop telling them that they're not good enough. Stop telling them that they're not Muslim enough. Stop telling them that, if they wear ripped jeans and they can't go to the masjid. No, if they're wearing ripped jeans and they want to go to the masjid, take a skirt with you. Encourage them to put it on, but don't tell them not to come. If they get a tattoo and you tell them, I've disowned you, think about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his response to those who did something that was displeasing to Allah, and how he would bring them back with empathy and with compassion. Know your children. Know what they're exposed to. Know what they're feeling. And the only way you can know them is if you're there for them. So I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal allows us all to be there, to be a positive presence in the life, not only in our own children, but in the children, for all the children of the Ummah, and to truly be those who can be role models for our children, and be those who our children look up to, open up to, communicate with, and feel comfortable speaking with. Jazakumullahu khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Dr. Suzy. It was a wonderful talk and really something that we can all try to adhere to from all sides, inshallah. Thank you so much. Okay, so next we have Imam Kamad. I'll provide a quick background for him, inshallah. So Imam Kamad was born in Brooklyn to immigrant parents from Montenegro. At age 19, he performed Hajj to Mecca, and then dedicated 10 years to studying Arabic and traditional Islam with scholars in Yemen, Jordan, and Syria. In 2016, he attended Yale University as an Eli Whitney Scholar, where he completed his BA in Near Eastern languages. Today, he is serving as the Muslim chaplain at Fairfield University. He is the Imam of the Monroe Masjid in Monroe, Connecticut, where he's also the lecturer for the Islamic community. So inshallah, I'll turn it over to him for his time.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I first want to thank you for inviting me here tonight, and I want to thank all of the speakers for their efforts and for their insight and for the knowledge that they shared with us here tonight. I'm not sure if there's anything left for me to say after their talks, but let's see what's left for me. And when I was invited to participate here tonight, in the past, I kind of been thinking about this topic since then, and how can we support our youth? How can we protect our youth? So it's been on my mind, and I'm trying to kind of. It's a difficult topic. It's not a simple. There's no simple answer to the question. I'm a parent, and many of us here are parents, and we worry about our children and their futures, and we want to protect them and support them, and we want them to have the best futures. So it's a challenging issue, but we hope that Allah Azza wa Jalla will help us to get through it. And again, He is the one that protects them in the end. Really, I mean, so we do our part, but we also have to remember that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the one that's really in control. I mean, we have the Quran as the Quranic example of the children of prophets, and Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam did everything right to guide his son and to show him the way, and I'm sure he gave him the best tarbiyah ever. These are prophets, and then again, in the end, Allah Azza wa Jal is in control. So we have to remember that first. We take the means, do our part as parents and as imams or educators, and remember that Allah Azza wa Jal in the end is really in control of the situation. I think since I've been working with many mosques and kind of been interacting with many youth in the communities, and I've seen the struggles. I mean, I've had my own struggles. I was born here in America. And just think about this point for a minute. My parents were not religious. My parents were anti-religious. and I ended up to be a person of religion. And I have family members who are religious, and then their children ended up to not be in religion, to be far from religion. So we do our part, and we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to guide all of our children to the right path. And before I even discuss these points that I have here, I think that this idea of children and youth and in their future, I think all of this has to start before we even have a child, to be quite frank. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Why am I having a child? Why am I bringing another human being into this world? You know, I think that that's really going to be important for us as they teach us. You know, that intention is very important. And I think that our intention for having this child or these children is for them to know Allah Azza wa Jal, for them to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for them to benefit society, for them to take the message of Islam to the next generation, to carry the amana to their children, and for Islam to be around, and for them to be a part of that. And so I think that intention has to be there even before having a child. I think that that's going to be crucial, that we as parents know what we want with our children, you know. The second thing I want to say here is that one of the things that I think many of our communities are lacking in or not really paying attention to is Islamic knowledge in the mosque. You know, I think that we need to, at least the mosques that I've been to, we don't really have a systematic approach to educating our young ones. And they have to know their religion, they have to know their purpose, they have to know why they're here, they have to know where they're going, they have to know about themselves, they have to know about, Patty mentioned, the nafs and the shaitaan and all these. So religious education, we have to offer them a proper religious education at a young age. And when I say proper religious education, I don't mean an education where we're harsh. Dr. Suzy's mentioned that, where we turn them away. We have to make them love religion and love Islam and love Allah and love the Prophet alayhi salatu salam. We have to teach them to love our tradition. They have to find joy in this religion. They can't find darkness and harshness and, like you said, this is haram and this is, and judging everything they do. It's really important for them to be in an environment that welcomes them, that's open to them, with the way they are, with their mistakes and with their imperfections. That's really important for us. I've been to too many mosques where they're really harsh with the kids, and where they make things difficult for the kids, where the kids don't want to come back to the mosque. Like Sheikh Muhammad Eslam says, if you're in a mosque where there's lots of children making noise, that's a sign of success, because that means that there's a generation that might be around in the future. And if you're in a mosque where there's no sounds and there's complete silence, then trying to introduce Islam to our young ones in a beautiful way and making them love Islam, I think that's going to be key. If people worship Allah because they love Him, and people follow the Prophet Muhammad because they love him, it's much better than having them worship Allah because they're afraid of Jahannam and because Allah's going to punish them, put them in hell forever, and so on. And so trying to use love more instead of fear, I think that's going to be very, very, very important for us. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ, right? Those who believe they're intense, most intense in their love for Allah Azza wa Jal. So again, Islamic knowledge, Islamic education, but using compassion and mercy. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We sent you as a mercy to mankind. And also the sin. We have to remember another thing here. The sin that we commit, that our children commit, there's no way to avoid that. This is Allah Azza wa Jal كَتَبَ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْهِ. Allah willed for that person to commit that sin. So it doesn't make sense to say now, oh, why'd you do it? Or and so on. There has to be this understanding that Allah Azza wa Jal creates everything, and maybe that sin is there for a reason. And the scholars talk about how there's a hikmah in committing a sin. It makes us humble. It helps us return to Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah says in the Quran, Inna Allah yuhibbu tawabina wa yuhibbu al-mutatahirin. Allah loves those who repent, meaning those who sin, and those who purify themselves. And the scholars say Allah qaddama at-tawwabin ala al-mutatahirin. Allah put those who repent before those who purify themselves to show His compassion and His mercy. to his creation. There are so many Quranic verses that talk about, Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Allah forgives all sins. La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Don't lose hope in Allah's mercy, and so on. And Dr. Suzy mentioned many good. I mean, everyone said some very beautiful things here. But you mentioned that how the Prophet. Again, we have to know our Prophet to be able to deal with the situation, deal with our youth, because the Prophet dealt with youth as well. There was a companion who came to the Prophet ﷺ, said, Ya Rasulullah, he said, I committed zina. I committed zina. This is what he said. How did the Prophet deal with this person ﷺ? He said, لَعَلَّكَ قَبَّلْتَ. Maybe you only kissed, go away. Right? In other words, make tawbah, return to Allah, will forgive you also for that sin. Right? The Prophet didn't stone him or hang him or reject him. The Prophet tried to help him. The Prophet tried to guide him. So I think that we have to remember that we're all guilty of sin, and that we have to remember that how powerful is that to if your child or my child commits a sin, to mention that to them. One who repents from sin is like one who has no sin, right? So Allah will always accept them, as long as they return to him. So I think that Islamic knowledge with mercy and compassion is going to be key for us. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed with many of the mosques in my neighborhood because they have a Jummah khutbah, and the imams most of the time they don't speak any English. It's in Arabic. And the imam's always talking about bid'ah and kufr and haram and bid'ah and this and that, and don't, making tawaf around graves and so on. These things are not happening here. So people that are educating our young ones have to really understand the environment that we live in, understand the society that we live in. It's very, and I think there was a documentary called Unmasked, why, Muslims, are leaving the mosque. So I think that we need to make the mosque a place that's welcoming to them, accepting to them. We need to answer their questions. If they have questions, I have so many of these young ones that I work with, they have so many questions. My daughter has questions, she has the questions of an atheist, well, I don't see Allah. How does he exist? Allah doesn't exist. So that's what she says to me. We have these conversations about, Allahu Azza wa Jal, and she's only 5. She's asking me these difficult questions, right? But I try to answer her, try to make sense of it to her. I don't reject her, say, oh, you're going to Jahannam because you said that. So I think that idea of compassion and mercy, with Islamic knowledge, teaching them about their tradition, will help them a lot in the future, before they get to those crucial stages where they're, where they might get lost and so on and so forth. I think the next thing I have here is suhba. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa kunu ma'a sadiqin. I remember one scholar told me that, try to choose the friends for your kids. Try to find the good kids and try to, because your kids want friends. They want to have company. They want to play. They want to talk. They want to have someone that's their age. So making the mosque a space where they can just come and hang out and talk. It doesn't have to be about religion. Let them talk about their issues or their problems or their desires or their goals or let them meet each other. Let them know each other. Let them have good suhbah, companions. That's why they're called sahaba. They were the best companions, and they had the best companion, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the idea of giving them good company, and supporting them, again, supporting them with good friends, supporting them with good people. Again, families should make friends with other good Muslim families, and hopefully that helps as well. Creating a healthy environment for them at home and also in the mosque. Another thing is a lot of us expect our kids to be religious, but we ourselves are not religious. I have a group of kids I teach in the mosque. Parents, they come, they drop off their kids outside. They don't come in the mosque. They drop their kids off. Kids come in the mosque. Parents come back to pick up their kids. They don't come in the mosque. They wait in the car. The kids go outside in the car. So there's no religious life at home, basically, right? Parents are heedless. Parents are not following the sunnah in their own lives. The parents, they care about dunya and money, and they're busy with their own, social media accounts and so on. They don't give any attention to the kids. Then they expect the kid to become, mashallah, this friend of Allah Azza wa Jal. So I think we have to be the first examples for the kid in the house. We have to have that, we have to have the prophetic, I hope, or something of the prophetic lifestyle in our lives: compassion, mercy, love, care, and so on in our lives. And we have to be also be there with them, enter the mosque, let them see religion working for the family, let them see happiness and joy. Again, if religion is making us miserable, it's not Islam. Islam is not supposed to make us miserable or our children miserable, right? It's supposed to be happiness and joy. It's supposed to be a beautiful experience, right? It's not supposed to be mashaqqa. Yassiru wa la tu'assiru. The Prophet said, make things easy, don't make things difficult for people. The first thing you want to protect our children from is kufr. This is the greatest thing. If you can protect them from, you already gave them iman, you taught them about Allah, His oneness, they said the shahada, mashallah, you've already accomplished a huge thing. If they know that they're Muslims, if you teach them the aqidah and help them understand it properly, that's a huge step in terms of success for their future. Dr. Suzy mentioned how they go to these philosophy classes when they get older and they're confused. I've taken that philosophy class myself. And if I didn't have my 10 years of experience and my own previous studies of Islam and my understanding of Islamic theology and my questions, my answers to those philosophical questions, I would have been in trouble as well, right? And I've met people who are religious and they go to those classes, they lose their religion. So again, that goes back to Islamic knowledge. If we can give them the basics, in the mosque when they're young, give them some theology, and a better understanding of the things that they're going to have to face in the future, then that's going to help them a lot. If we send them there without any theology, without any understanding of aqaid, then it might be difficult for them. Again, being a role model for them and also trying to find good friends for them. There's a good community in Richmond Hill, New York that I work with. They're youth, they're young people, and they call me and I try to kind of interact with them and help them out. They do some really good things for the youth. So for example, they have wrestling, they have basketball, they have trips, they have camping, they go to Turkey together. They have all these things that they do together, which are all halal. So again, I think that our youth want to do things. They want to have fun in life as well, right? And our religion doesn't prevent them from having fun, really. So if there's something mubah, it's permissible, let them do it. Let them have fun. Let them have fun activities. As a community, as a mosque, maybe we should try to create those events for them where they can come together and play basketball and maybe do wrestling and go skiing. I took a group on a ski trip. They had lots of fun. So during these fun activities, try to maybe incorporate some, Islamic teachings there, maybe storytelling. Children love stories. Create role models for them. The Sahaba, we have the Sahaba and the Sahabiyat, these great role models. So when they're having these fun activities, these young, these youth in Richmond Hill, they do this. They attract the youth with wrestling and with all these different events and sports, but at the same time they give you like 5 minutes or 10 minutes where they talk about a companion, a sahabi, or something like that, to give them this, to create the image of a role model in their minds. So I think that they're doing a great job, really. And so again, at that age, they want to have fun. They want to do things. They want to have friends. So if we can create the space for them where they can have all of that fun and also support them in doing that, I think that's going to be very, very important for them. Again, keeping them busy. Like Imam Shafi says, "An-nafsu in lam tushaghilha bil khair, shaghalatka bi sharr." The nafs, the human soul, if you don't keep it busy with good, it'll keep you busy with bad, basically. So keeping them busy, trying to keep them busy with activities, trying to keep them busy with events, trying to also give them some responsibilities, let them lead some initiatives in the mosque, let them have open conversations where we're not even present. Sometimes they don't want the imam present or the parent present. You see, like I have a class, I teach the youth in my mosque. Once the parents sit in the back, the children, they stop talking. So I say, parents, I don't want you here. Let them talk and let them feel that they can say anything to me. I'd had a Muslim student come to me and say he's homosexual. In my class, he came to me on the side, said, I have these feelings. You know what I said to him? Don't tell anyone. Tell me, and I'm here to help you, support you. I didn't turn him away and say, you are going to Jahannam. I had more mercy for him now, and I wanted to help him. And he came back. He kept coming back to my classes, right? So again, we don't have to turn anybody away. We have to try to accept everyone. And there's a beautiful story about a man who entered the mosque drunk, right? Wallahi, I've prayed with a person drunk next to me. One of my cousins who was drinking, he said, he prayed next. I said, pray with me anyway. Pray next to me. There was a man who went to the mosque, he was drunk. And he wanted to pray in the Jamaat, and the people, they could smell him. And the group of them wanted to kick him out. أخرجوه أخرجوه من قريتنا إنهم أناس يتطهرون. Right, tried to expel him. So, but he refused. He said, "No, I'm going to pray anyway." Right. So the Imam said, "Listen, let him pray." Right, let him pray with us. The man prayed in the mosque, drunk, intoxicated. When they gave the salam, this man, he stayed in sajda. He remained in sajda, and they all got up and they waited and waited. They're looking at him. What's up? What's going on here? Why is he still in sajda? They went all next to him. They found he was dead. He died in sajda. This person who was drunk, he died in namaz. He died praying to Allah Azza wa Jal. So we never know. We never know. We always have to, like you said, support them. Don't turn them away. Try to help them. Have compassion and mercy for them. If they commit a sin, Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. So empowering the youth. I think having these conversations with them where they can come to us with their as an imam, I let them feel that. You can come to me with any problem. Even if you don't want to tell your parents, come and tell me. I won't judge you. Whatever the issue is, right? So creating trust between us and them, making them feel like, you're welcome to come and ask me whatever it is. If you have issues in your life, if you're having problems in life, you know that you can call me. Creating that for them. Again, support groups, especially for new Muslims. I know not a lot of these young people who are converts, they come to Islam and they feel left out. They don't have family. Their family turns away from them. They don't have any support, and they rely on us as Muslims to support them. And so again, I think we have to also try and focus on that a bit as well. Another thing that I know maybe I'm going a bit too much here, but I just want to try to mention these points here. Love of dunya, love of hubbu dunya ra'su kulli khati'ah. If we as parents teach our children to love dunya, whether it be with our words or our actions and our conversations, that's going to impact them tremendously in the future. We have to teach them hubbul akhirah, to love the afterlife, to love Allah Azza wa Jal in our own actions. I know many Muslim families, you go and sit with them, I sit with them. They talk about their Mercedes-Benz, they talk about their cars, they talk about money, they talk about this, they talk about, everything is dunya talk. And the poor kids are there listening to all of that dunya talk, right? You have to be successful. This guy has this many cars, and he has this many businesses, and Bezos makes billions of dollars a minute or an hour, God knows, right? So we have to, first of all, if we love dunya, they're gonna know that, right? So zuhudu fi dunya, teach them about zuhud, teach them about loving the akhirat. Again, this goes back to religious education, but also let's not be people of dunya and then expect our kids to be people of akhirah. That's also problematic, because they learn from our states. Al-halu yasri, my state is going to impact the people around me. If I'm in love with this world and all I care about is going to work and making more money and having more homes and going on more vacations and all of the dunya, that's also going to impact them, right? So kind of focusing our own attention to the akhirah, and also hopefully they'll also catch on to that. And learn from us. Another thing, so love of dunya is one thing that I've seen spoil many kids in my own family and in my own community. We came here as immigrants from Montenegro, a Muslim community. We were Muslims back home in a small town called Pluff, and many of them. There are actually more of us here now than there in New York City. There's about 20,000 members. Diaspora who came here from that town. But guess what? These are all Muslims who came to America. 99% of them lost their kids. 99% lost their kids. No Islam, no identity, no religion, nothing. Why? The parents didn't care about religion, number one. And the parents came to America with one goal: money, dunya. I came here for dunya. I got my dunya, but I lost my kids. Right? So that's another thing. You have to make friends with them, be with them, spend time with them, play with them, let them feel that you love them, that you're there for them. Keep them busy with you, go on trips with them, be busy with them, take them to sports, play with them, right? Fill their time with beneficial things so that they can, inshallah azza wa jal, not preoccupy themselves with things that are harmful for them. And the next thing that I've seen, noticed that kind of destroys the kids, is spoiling them. like especially parents who are very wealthy, they give their kids, you know, they give them the new cars, they give them everything early on in life. Guess what? What's that kid going to look forward to in the future? You know, my father says, he says about like some of his family members who give their kids a Mercedes when they're 18. He said, what's he going to drive when he's 30 and 40? You know, so let them work a little bit for their, you know, for the things that they want in life. You know, don't give them everything so that we spoil them and then they think that, you know, everything's going to be good forever. You know, like they say, Umar said, you know, be a bit coarse. The ni'mah might not always be there. So again, let them work a little bit for their, and I think many Americans actually have this right. They kind of make their children responsible for some things in life, you know, pay for that, make them, you know, for example, get a job, or, you know, make them responsible to pay back pay their parents back. I have an uncle who makes his kids pay rent. They're all adults now, they all work, but they live in his house. He makes them, not because he wants their money. The money's theirs. They're going to inherit the money, but to make them responsible, to make them feel like, hey, you have to also work for it. You know, you have to also put some effort into being successful in life. So again, those are my remarks. May Allah forgive me for any mistakes. I thank you all for having me here. Again, this topic is a huge topic. I mean, I think we could have hours and hours and days and weeks on this topic because it's so crucial. I mean, I'm afraid for my kids and their future. I always think about it. You know, they're still young, so I don't know yet. But I've met too many families. I've met too many young ones who we've lost. We've lost so many of them to drugs, to alcohol. I've lost my first cousin in a car accident. Young girl died in New York, flipped off the bridge, speeding in a car, racing. Their parents gave them a Porsche before she turned 70. Anyway, I think that I've said enough. And so we have a lot of work to do here, I think. May Allah help us and support us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan, Imam Kamad. Some very important reminders for all of us there. Appreciate your time, and I hope we all benefit and implement it to our lives, inshallah. So we have some time for Q&A. I have one question that was submitted electronically, but before that, we can also accept questions live. If you want to raise your hand, and we can unmute you to take your questions, inshallah. Brother Pervez, do you have a question?
Assalamu alaikum. I actually don't have a question. I'm just wowed at the amount of insights and talent that we've unleashed from these 4 guest speakers. We know they were very talented, but subhanallah, as just to echo what Imam Kamal said, we've got a lot of wood to chop, but subhanallah, you know, as soon as the masjid open, we're gonna have all of you on site again, because indeed, and I see Brother Levon Brown, Imam Levon Brown, echo the same feeling. You know, it's unfortunate that we have just a whopping 40 people join this program. Typically on site, we would have at least, you know, a couple hundred people join a program like this. You know, I'm just incredibly very grateful for everyone to join the speakers, and I'm just also letting you know, stay tuned, because we are going to have you over and over again, because we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg. Jazakallah khair.
I have one question here, and it's not stated who it's for. So inshallah, if any of you want to answer it, or we can have multiple answers. So an anonymous attendee is asking, my sister has struggled with depression, and my parents' response was on a similar note of them not understanding and sort of suggesting you need to practice Islam more, which completely turned her away from Islam because she felt she wasn't good enough. How would you suggest, how do you suggest talking about Islam to a person who is actively trying to shut down that part of herself? Do you just have patience and wait, or what? So inshallah, who would like to take that question from the panel? Okay, Dr. Suzy.
Assalamu alaikum again. So I'll take a first stab at it, and then my esteemed co-panelists, I'm sure, can add. I kind of wanted to approach it from the counselor perspective, in that it is very common that when someone is experiencing sadness, when someone is feeling depression, our first response is, pray 2 rak'ahs and you'll feel better. We'll remind the person, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, which we know in the Quran reminds us that it is surely but by the remembrance of Allah that hearts find ease. But we also recognize that the act of tawakkul, the act of reliance upon Allah Azza wa Jal, requires active steps along with that intentionality in connecting with Allah. So Allah Azza wa Jal provides the means. And I think Brother Yaseen and Sister Patricia, and I believe Imam Kamal also had done a great job of pointing out the importance that we have to stop being a community that shuns the assistance of counselors, of therapists, that says, that keeps treating mental health difficulties as something that can just be wiped away by reading Quran. The Quran, alhamdulillah, is a gift to us, but Allah Azza wa Jalla has also gifted us with medication, has gifted us with abilities to have the means by which we can bring about, certain cures to illnesses. The COVID vaccine, if we were to look at that one, we could say, what, I'm not taking the COVID vaccine, and I'm not going to start like a political debate or anything here, but I'm not taking the vaccine because I'm just going to pray and make dua that I don't get sick, and so then that should be enough. But if Allah Azza wa Jal has provided for us a means of protection, has provided us a means or a cure, then we should take that while also having that tawakkul. The same goes for the young woman who is struggling with depression. First, believe her. If someone says they are depressed, don't dismiss it. Maybe they are, preemptively self-diagnosing. Maybe it's not clinical depression, but it could be situational depression, and that's also very real. Don't be the person that dismisses it. Don't be the person that diagnoses it. Unless you are a mental health professional, it's not your place to do so. It's like someone who says, my leg hurts, and you're just like, well, take aspirin. And a month later, they're still complaining, and you're just like, take more aspirin. You're not a doctor. Don't prescribe the aspirin. There may be something more there. Encourage your sister to seek some kind of therapeutic intervention. And alhamdulillah, we are surrounded now with different faith-based interventions. Again, I mentioned Cornerstone, our organization that focuses on faith-based Islamic intervention for socio-emotional wellness. But there are so many other counselors. I saw in Brother Yaseen's slides, he mentioned Khalil Center, which is wonderful. I know there's a Silver Lining Counseling, which is in the Princeton area. There's Olive Branch Therapy, which is in East Brunswick. There are so many Muslim and faith-based forms of intervention now more than ever, and it's offered through telehealth as well and televisits now. So help your sister get the help that she needs. And when you say, how do you talk to her about Islam? Please, please, please don't tell her you need to pray more. Don't tell her you're not making enough dua, because that can be exactly what would push her away and make her feel like, I make dua all the time. Why is Allah not relieving me of this pain or of this pressure? So guide her. Explain to her that Allah Azza wa Jal is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He is the most merciful, the most compassionate. Show her that mercy and compassion in your actions. Guide her maybe by giving her examples. The year of sorrow, Aam al-Huzn, how the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam experienced deep sorrow as well. Just don't let her feel like she's alone. Don't let her feel like she's an anomaly or that what she's experiencing is anti-Islam. It's not. And it's something that whether you look at the Prophet Yunus or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even the father of Yusuf, Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam, they experienced grief, they experienced sadness, they experienced difficulty, and Allah Azza wa Jal gave a solution, and that solution, yes, there was a remembrance of Allah, but there was also other avenues as well.
Jazakallah khairan. I do have another question, but I just wanted to make sure or check if any of the other panelists wanted to provide a response as well. Okay, sure. So another question from earlier from a sister. What can we do to make our children better Muslims? What kind of activities can we create to keep our children occupied and close to God?
I guess I can start, and then the others can add to what I have to say. So yeah, Dr. Suzy, thank you for that reply. If someone's having mental issues or depression, again, in our tradition, we're taught to send people to the experts of that particular issue. If someone's an engineer, then I'm an imam. I'm not going to answer the question about engineering or about psychological issues that someone might be having or whatever it is. So I think that we have to support them in that way and be there for them if they're having issues like that. And remember, show them compassion, show them mercy. You remind me of a story about the Prophet ﷺ, who there was an old woman who would come. She again had a mental health issue, and the Prophet ﷺ would listen to her for long. She would talk for a long period of time. She would talk and talk and talk, and the Prophet would listen and listen and listen. And Sayyidina Umar said to me, Ya Rasulullah, aren't you wasting your time here? So the Prophet said, if I don't listen to her, who's going to listen to her? If I don't listen to her, who's going to listen to her? So the rahmah of the Prophet is tremendous. And again, if our young ones believe in Allah Azza wa Jal and His oneness and the Prophet they've already taken a huge step in their life. So we have to appreciate that they have iman. That's the greatest ni'mah, is iman. There's a hadith in Bukhari that says, "Man qala la ilaha illallah sidqan min qalbihi harram Allahu jasadahu ala nar." If a person says la ilaha illallah sincerely from his heart, Allah will forbid that person from going to hell. Right? So again, we have to have a lot of compassion and mercy, and we can't put people in hell before Allah puts them in hell. Right? You never can say you're going to hell or you're going to go to hell. We don't know that. If Allah wants, He can forgive them. يَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. He can forgive whoever He wants, and He can punish whoever He wills. So that's Allah's thing in the future. We don't know who's going where. عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ رَبِّي فِي الْكِتَابِ. When Pharaoh says to Musa alayhi salam, what about the people that came before us? Where are they going in the afterlife? Sayyidina Musa was very wise. He said, عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ رَبِّي فِي. Allah knows where they're going. Right, so we should not put people in hell. That's Allah's job, right? Try to. What does the Quran say? وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Give them good news. Give them glad tidings. If they do something, even something small that's good, say mashallah, like praise them for it and thank them for it and encourage them, right? It's a good deed equals 10 good deeds or 700 good deeds, and a sin equals 1, and a person can repent from a sin. Remember that. Right, so the odds are for us, not against us. The odds are for our young ones as well. We want to give them a good life. We want to give them a happy life. We want to give them a beneficial life, inshallah azza wa jalla. But also we want them to understand that Allah is Rahman. Your question about, I have young ones. I have 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and 2-year-old. I have Muslim TV for the Muslim kids TV for them, right? So they want to watch something, so try to get them to watch something that's Islamic. So I have the Muslim kids TV, and again, I'm also understand the reality. We live in a society that's very diverse and it's very challenging. So I also let my children watch some other things that are not Islamic TV, like Spirit. My daughter loves horses, and I take her to the horse farm, and she learns horseback riding. So creating fun things for them. They don't have to necessarily be Islamic. They can be swimming. They can be running. They can be playing a sport, they can be art, other things that are just not necessarily religious based. So that's my answer. And again, the others are welcome to kind of come in, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I guess I'm unmuted. I just wanted to say Jazakumullahu khair to the panelists for giving us this wonderful talk and putting on this wonderful program. Thank you, MCGP board. My children also love Spirit. They try to watch the series back to back. I have to stop them. But I also wanted to give a shameless plug for MCGP while we're talking about this. Is MCGP has just hired on January 1st social work, a director for social work that's associated with the free clinic in MCGP. So, as the school year continues and as we start to do more for the children and for adults as well, we are gathering the resources to be a true diverse center where the community can come and get the help that they need and have the voices that they can go to if they need anything, inshallah. So I just wanted to share that. And Jazakumullahu khair. Again, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah, Ustad Lavan. So we'll do a couple more questions. I want to be respectful of the panelists' time as well. One quick one that came in earlier for Brother Yaseen. Is there any intervention center in Ithaca for Muslims?
You can always come to me. That's the first and foremost. Like, if you don't have anyone to talk to, like, please. That we already have the youth group. So we have the youth group for the Ithaca children on Monday nights. The link gets sent out in the Al Huda emails. So if you want to contact Brother Mahmoud about that, we can have your children join that. If you need an intervention, you can talk to me. I really believe the secret of our area is Imam Marwan Zaman in Horseheads, the IAFL, Islamic Association of the Finger Lakes. He's special. So if you really just need to talk to someone, anyone in your family, any age, he's an incredible resource. Mufti Anas in Binghamton is also really amazing as well. He can relate with young people very well. He's from here. He knows how to speak the language. But I would also suggest a lot of resources are online now. And so I would really take advantage of, Sister Dr. Suzy's talked about this. You can text Nasiha Youth Hotline at 1-866-NASEEHA, NASEEHA. There's text salam if you just need to text someone when you're like feeling depressed or whatever like this, or whatever you just need to talk to someone. If you text salam, SALAM, to 741-741, maybe Zishan could type that in. Text salam to 741-741. And then the online, just check online. A lot of these things are online now. Even if they're talking to me, they'll do it online. So I'm always available. And then there's also plenty of online resources right now. Alhamdulillah.
We'll take one more question from the chat. Can you please provide high level of different types of PTSD we experience in life as we go through our journey as adults and children? How do we cope with this struggle?
So I'm not sure if someone else wants to jump in here, but I think if we were gonna try to better understand PTSD, it probably would require another couple of hours. And I don't think we could do it justice in just a few minutes. There's definitely varying intensities when it comes to PTSD. For example, one division of Cornerstone works very closely with the refugee community. And the PTSD that we see that refugees struggle with may look very different than the PTSD that we may see a family, for example, or a woman who has gone through a very difficult divorce. It doesn't mean that one PTSD is more important or takes precedence over another. Anyone who is struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, again, we don't invalidate the intensity of those emotions. When we look to the Quran and we see that in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us, لا يكلف الإنسان نفسه أعوذ من الشيطان لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah Azza wa Jal does not burden a soul with a burden that's heavier than that soul can bear. So for the person who maybe is coping with PTSD because they've lost their home, they've seen their children raped in front of them, they've lost a child drowning and trying to cross the border into a refugee camp, that was their test and that was their difficulty, and they're struggling with the PTSD from that. And someone who may be struggling with PTSD because they had a very bad marriage and they've gotten out of it, that's their test. And so we don't equate and say one is harder to bear than the other. We say that each person is given the burden that they are able to bear. And so if we're going to talk high level, I would say that there are varying degrees of PTSD. We are seeing now through the pandemic, many cases of PTSD, again, on varying levels, whether it's loss of income, loss of family, loss of a community. And I think we do have a lot of work to do. I think one of the most uplifting things that I kind of heard tonight in terms of solutions was what the Imam had mentioned, that MCGP is leading the way, hiring a social worker, having someone on site who is going to be there. We need this in every masjid. We need this in every Islamic school. We need this in every community, because we have the talent, we have the educated individuals, we have the training programs, we have so many people in our community who can do this, but many times people who are in the mental health field, people who are in human services, who are in social work, turn away from Muslim community service because it is downplayed in our communities. It is minimized. It is seen as something that, a service we shouldn't have to pay for. So when we change the dialogue about the importance of these types of interventions in our community, we're going to be able to have the support, inshallah, that we need, not just for us, but for our children and their children as well, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Suzy. So one last question. I think it's a good one, and then we'll turn it over. So growing up in Western society as a Muslim is difficult, especially for teens and young adults. I feel as if I have always been pulled like a magnet while trying to change for the better, but every once in a while I find myself sinning again and returning to my old ways, and it seems like a habit. How do I get better and put a solid end, because this too causes depression and mental health issues?
One thing is to reframe what sin is. Sometimes we just take sin as I'm a terrible person. And to me, one of the things that has helped me is to see sin as a symptom of an imbalanced life. There's some void that I'm trying to adjust through sin. And when it comes to addiction, often that means I'm trying to escape or avoid a missing part of myself. And so it's not that you're a bad person because you keep falling into the same habit. It's that there's something that we have to refigure out the equation so that I feel whole, so that I can live a wholesome life. And so it's just about, one of the things I often emphasize with my students is to be very cognizant. Imam Ghazali calls the five senses, the five gates to the heart. And so when that equation, we're taking more negative into our heart than we're putting in positive, then negative actions will come out of our bodies. And so we want to fix that equation and keep putting light into our hearts, keep filling ourselves with light, filling ourselves with positivity, filling ourselves with good nutrition, good friendships, good things. And when we do that, then those habits will take care of themselves, inshallah. So don't give up. You're not a bad person because of that. You're a person who's just figuring out your equation, and that journey will lead back to Allah, because otherwise Allah wouldn't bring you here to listen to us today or ask this question. And Allah will fulfill that dua. Allah bless you, Allah bless you, Allah bless you. Our teacher Ubaidullah Evans, Sheikh Ubaidullah Evans, he told us the person who continues to fight an addiction, a habit that they didn't like for the sake of God, and that they die in that struggle and they never overcame it, that on the day of judgment, they'll be raised as martyrs. So fight the good fight. Allah bless you.
Jazakallah, Brother Yaseen. Very important question and a beautiful answer, mashallah. Thank you so much. Okay, so inshallah, we've had a, alhamdulillah, very good program today. Just before we close off, I want to ask Imam Kamal to close us with a dua for some of the sick in our community. I know, Brother Yaseen, your father's been in the hospital for a little bit, so may Allah give him shifa. And inshallah, Brother Kemal, please make dua for our community and for the Muslim Ummah overall and for the sick, inshallah.
Ya Rab. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه إن الله لا يخلف الميعاد ربنا إننا آمنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار ربنا إننا آمنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين اللهم اشفنا وعافنا واعف عنا اللهم تجاوز عن سيئاتنا اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا اللهم احسن ختامنا يا رب العالمين اللهم خذ بأيدينا وبأيدي المسلمين اللهم اصلح بيننا وبين المسلمين اللهم احفظ أولادنا يا رب العالمين اللهم خذ بأيديهم يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اشف مرضانا وعافنا واعف عنا اللهم اشف مرضانا وعافنا واعف عنا اللهم اشف مرضانا وعافنا واعف عنا اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى يا رب العالمين يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اجعلنا من المتقين اللهم اجعلنا من الصالحين اللهم اجعلنا من المحسنين اللهم اجعلنا من التوابين اللهم اجعلنا من المتطهرين اللهم اجعلنا من الصديقين اللهم اجعلنا من الصديقين اللهم اجعلنا من الصديقين يا رب العالمين يا أرحم الراحمين واحفظ أولادنا وأهلنا يا رب العالمين وانصرنا والمسلمين يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم ارفع عنا البلاء اللهم ارفع عنا البلاء اللهم ارفع عنا البلاء يا أرحم الراحمين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين بارك الله فيكم استغفر الله جزاكم الله خيرا
Jazakallah khairan, Imam Kamad. Thank you again to the panelists for joining and giving us some beautiful wisdom today. Thank you for all the attendees for joining. Inshallah, I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. I'm putting my email into the chat. If you want to email me or any of the participants who've shared their emails for any of your questions, inshallah, we'll try and get to that. So thank you again, and may Allah bring us together in the masjid soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.